Okay, onwards and upwards. What do we got next?
Catmint. You said you to have one in the garden.
Oh, I love catmint. Catmint is obviously a mint. Uh, it Our cat doesn't particularly like it, so it's called that. Catnip is a very close relative with much larger leaves, but also a Nepeta. There are some dwarf forms. There are some that bloom April into the end of May. There are some that bloom later and into summer. I find it an invaluable plant at the front of a border. It also does very well in trough plantings and containers. And whether it's and it blooms a very, very long time and tends to rebloom to some extent in the fall if you shave it back after its first initial bloom. Good plant. Also,
it's being used a lot.
Minty sense.
It's being used a lot by the highway department in Michigan, that we've seen people say there's lavender blooming along the side of the freeway. I go, no, it's not lavender. It's just a whole huge planting of catmint.
Mm-hmm.
I love the names they're giving them for these little ones.
Yeah.
Persian beauty and cat's meow and kitten paws and for the little tiny
perfection.
Perfection, yeah.
Right. There are some new dwarf forms that are out that are really nice, and yeah, you've named some of the names, but there's a whole bunch of them. A fair amount of breeding has gone on with them, and they have become very much more compact and very much more floriferous than some of the old-fashioned varieties.
Which is good because they're bigger than people expect them to be, the species.
Yeah, some of the varieties can get up 3 feet tall.
Did you bring back Unensis?
Oh,
it was a tall.
Oh, yeah, there's one called Unensis, which I brought. It's more broadleaf and larger. It's more upright. It's not a sprawler like the ones you
Siberian. Yeah.
And then there's Nepeta siberica. There are a whole bunch of tall forms, which I like, but they don't do what the shorter forms do, which is to form a nice front of border effect.
Okay, let's go for it.
All right.
Well, we just stepped into a whole world, didn't we?
Yeah, peonies are. They're a wonderful plant. It's a very, very long-lived plant. Couple things that you should know. Unlike most plants, peonies transplant best in September and October. You should never try to transplant them after, full break of spring. You can do it at first ground thaw and maybe for a week or so, but if you do it any later, you're going to run into trouble. They don't like to be moved when they're starting to shoot up leaves and buds. And at very worst, you'll ruin the flowering that season. But I love peonies. They have a beautiful foliage, and the flower is from anywhere. It's from pure white to doubles, pinks, salmons. Well, you got, and then the yellow. Now that yellow, that is a relatively new form that has been around. Tends to be very, very expensive. And
it would be a tree peony,
and it's a tree peony, which, by the way, is a distinction which is misunderstood. Tree peonies are not really trees; they are woody bushes that get up 3 or 4 feet tall, and they come in a range of colors too. One downside of peonies is that they are relatively short to bloom. You have to enjoy them, when they're in flower. I find that the yellow ones especially tend to bloom down in the bush, so you're better off cutting it off and floating just the flower itself in a bowl, and that's
a bowl of water.
A bowl of water, and that's a really nice show. But you can do that with all the peonies.
I thought it was interesting.
You can do that with hellebores. Go ahead.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting with the yellows that when Barzella first came out, It was about $100 a plant.
125 the first one I
Yeah.
saw.
And,
Yeah, the yellow one and Carl
last year,
Bartzella.
last
Yeah.
year and the year before, I was told by several people that Costco was selling them for $15 a piece. So it's kind of like the hostas that back in the old days when there wasn't tissue culture, a hosta, by the time a new hosta came out, you were paying $100 a plant for it. So the
Yeah.
prices come down. Are there quite, Sonia, I've been neglecting the chat here.
There's only really two. One, there was a conversation about ligularia and how and when it spreads, but I think that got mostly sort of discussed in the chat. Debbie has a catmint that doesn't seem to do well. It's on the west side of the yard and planted in front of a short brick wall. Any ideas about why the Nepeta is not doing great there?
What's your best conditions for growing the catmint?
Wow, I found it grows anywhere. I don't know.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's what I'm wondering.
It's
Yeah.
usually drought tolerant and
Yeah.
it would be sunny. It would love that spot. I
Does
would
want
think.
sun. It's not that good in the shade.
It didn't do well at my sister's house, and I think it was because it got flooded there when there was a heavy rain. It was too near the downspout.
That could
Otherwise, yeah, I've seen it in
What
heavy
about-
soil and sandy soil.
What about salt? If it's along a sidewalk?
Boy, I don't know
Maybe
about salt,
I
but
don't
it
know.
grows along the side of the expressway.
Yeah,
There's gotta be
that's what I
salt
mean. It
just
gets
thrown all
sprayed
over the place there.
Oh, well.
Maybe the brick is giving it too much shade.
It could be, if it's sitting right against a brick wall, because you're
That's
right, they
possible.
like to be in the sun. They like to be in the unmitigated sun.
You never know conditions till you really look at them yourselves too.
Yeah.
It's so hard to.
Probably
True.
testing the soil would be a good idea. Here in Connecticut, the state will do it for you. You send it up to the what do you call it? Extension service station. We have several in the state, and they'll test the soil and tell you, oh, it's too acidic, or it's too alkaline, or whatever, or it's too short of this fertilizer or that.
Yeah.
So it'd probably be worthwhile doing that. It's I have-
Because Nepeta's real durable and
yeah.
usually
I've
doesn't
never
have
heard
the
this
trouble
before.
of growing.
By the way,
Not very
peony-
often. Not very often you hear people complain about the catnip. Not.
exactly.
I mean,
In fact, we've had clients that said, okay, I'm tired of that, take it out because there's too much of it. It blooms, you mow it down, it blooms again, you mow it down, it blooms again, and they got tired of it. I thought, okay, all right.
The tree peonies, by the way, tend to be more money than herbaceous peonies. They are better adjusted to shade than the herbaceous peonies. However, all peonies will do all right in some shade, so you don't have to have it in full sun. But I think you must put tree peonies in some shade. You cannot put them in full sun.
Tell me about the propagation of the tree peonies. I understand
Right.
that they put on a nurse root, and so that because we quite often see the herbaceous peony foliage coming up at the base of a tree peony.
Tree peonies are almost always propagated by grafting. The wild form has a very weak root system and can probably not be divided very readily, or certainly not very often. The only way that I've known them to be propagated is by grafting, a lot of which is done in China, by the way. I think, first of all, that's where the tree peony is native, but secondly, that's where labor has in the past been less expensive than here. Grafting is a fine art, and you're not going to find a person who knows grafting, on the border of Mexico and the United States, let's say. So you probably have to get a Chinese expert to do it here. Anyway. But that's why they're so expensive. And it's not uncommon to see them in a couple $100 each, some of the varieties.
Yeah.
You can get some varieties which are mostly Chinese grown that'll sell in the $15 to $25 range, but not, in the $10 or less range ever.